Today's topic is appreciation of evidence by appellate courts. And the session will be, the speaker of this today's session is Dr. Jyotirmoy Adhikari, who is not only a popular name amongst lawyers but among students also, being a distinguished faculty with the Law Faculty of Calcutta University and West Bengal National University of Juridical Sciences. I would request one of our guests present today, Mr. Zahidul Bari, who is the Secretary of Democratic Lawyers Association of Bangladesh, who has been a constant support in our endeavor to enrich the students and junior lawyers. We request Mr. Zahidul Bari to say a few words before Dr. Jyotirmoy Adhikari takes up the session.
Good afternoon. Thanks to Mr. Shomadip Raha for inviting me to speak something. I first express my gratitude thanks to the host, to the speaker and participants of this session. I appreciate the initiative taken by the All India Lawyers Union West Bengal's student unit to this webinar series, and I have participated in a number of sessions, and today's session is, I think it is very important for this, not only for the students but for the lawyers, young lawyers and the lawyers who will appear in the appellate court to argue their appeals, both civil and criminal. Very much important and helpful to the lawyers who will conduct their case. These topics covers a very wide jurisdiction. It is the whole of Evidence Act and the procedure of civil and criminal procedure, because the appeals both are civil and criminal appeals, and it is very important the appreciation of evidence, because in order to succeed in an appeal, a lawyer must show that the trial court or the lower court has not properly appreciated the evidence on record, and it has not correctly followed the rules of evidence as provided in our Evidence Act. So this will, Mr. Dr. Jyotirmoy Adhikari will cover all this aspect, and like other participants, I am also participating as a learner, because I believe that everybody should learn. Learning is a lifelong process, and particularly for the lawyers should learn from the cradle till their death. It is a learning process, and for development of lawyers, where this continuous legal education is necessary for not only the students but also for the lawyers. And I hope that this session will be very helpful to the participant. And in advance, I thank Mr. Jyotirmoy Adhikari, who is a the main discussions of these topics. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Badi. Our speaker for today's topic, appreciation of evidence by appellate courts, Dr. Jyotirmoy Adhikari, not only a distinguished lawyer, a distinguished faculty in the legal arena. He is with us, and I'll straightway request him to initiate today's session. Over to Dr. Adhikari.
Okay. Now, hello everyone. It's a great pleasure for me to share my experience on the subject, that is appreciation of the evidence by the appellate court. The topic has been selected by Shoumo. Very interesting topic indeed, and I shall be able to share my experience from my court practice and the other thing. Okay, and let us start. Actually, it's my first new experience in delivering lecture on this online, so I am feeling little uncomfortable. So whether everybody is hearing me or not. So first, anyway, first up, I giving my gratitude to the organization that they have given me the opportunity to say something on this topic. Now you see, I have decided to divide this topic on 3 parts. Okay, first part is the principles of appreciation of the evidence. Second part is the power of the appellate court, and third part, that what is the mode of exercise of such power, that is the appreciation of evidence by the appellate court. So I just 3 parts. First of all, I want to say that appreciation of evidence is a very difficult task, and it is essentially the task of the trial court, of the trial judge, because the trial judge has the opportunity to see the witness. Trial judge has the opportunity to see the demeanor of the witness, or to record the demeanor of the witness, and also he has the opportunity to notice the reaction of the witness over the question, which the appellate court do not have. That is why the decision of the trial court is very important. What the appellate court will do, that he will just reassess or reevaluate the finding of facts that has been taken by the trial judge, whether the finding of facts based on appreciation of evidence is correct or incorrect. That is reevaluated by the appellate court. So appellate court reappreciate the evidence or reviewed the evidence only in order to ascertain that whether the finding of facts arrived by the trial court is correct or incorrect. Now, in our country, so far as the appreciation of evidence is concerned, we are not following the principle of falsus in uno, falsus in omnibus like English law. That means where once the one part is false, so the other part is also false, and rejected the entire evidence on the ground of its contamination. We are appreciating the evidence by separating the truth from the falsehood. That is the most difficult task, that how to separate the truth from the falsehood. This is the task of the trial judge, and High Court will evaluate it in the appeal in order to understand whether the finding of facts of the trial court is a correct or incorrect. Only that extent. Now, the separate from the truth and the falsehood, that is it depends on the case to case. When the case is based on direct evidence, that is the eyewitnesses. Now, eyewitnesses has seen the incident. Now, the version of the eyewitnesses are generally based on subjective knowledge, that because every person has seen the incident from their own perspective, and our human observation is imperfect, unlike videography. When a particular thing has been videographed, then whatever we have seen, that is actually the exact version we are getting. But when a human, a person is seeing a thing or is observing a thing, and after observation, whatever when he reproduce the thing, the same incident to the authority or to the court, then it mixed with his memory plus his own imagination. So it is contaminated to some extent, and that is why in our law we know that the hearsay is not admissible, only the first-hand knowledge. But the first-hand knowledge also is based on observation plus imagination. And generally, when the person, the witness, when he come to the court after a long time for giving evidence, then his memory is fallible. Then it is more exaggerated by his own imagination. And in most of the cases, as we know in practice, that their evidences has been tutored. There has been evidences has been distorted by some various extraneous factors. And so it will be very difficult for the court to separate the truth from the falsehood, because truth and falsehood in most of the cases are mixed together in a such a fashion that it is very difficult for the court. So that is why the task of the court is very difficult. Now the thing is that Supreme Court in various decisions says that it is inevitable that there is certain discrepancies in the evidence. If the witnesses and their version is free from infirmity, then it creates doubts. But it is natural that when a witness is submitting before the court, is giving his deposition during the trial, then his evidence supposed to suffer from some infirmities. And here the court has to notice that the time when the incident took place and when he is coming before the court for giving his deposition, that time gap. If the time gap is big, then in such cases there is a chance of exaggeration, there is a chance of embellishment, there is a chance of giving a deviation from the evidences. So there is a chance of the discrepancies, and the Supreme Court nowadays says that it is natural. Now, on the basis of the minor discrepancies or this kind of embellishment, a person or the accused person cannot take the advantage. But here we have the court has to understand the entire evidence throughout. Court has to take an holistic view, a pragmatic view. I just go refer one decision where the Supreme Court says, this is the 2019 decision. Name of the case is Sachin Kumar Singhania versus State of MP. It is reported in 2019, volume 8, Supreme Court cases, page 371. Here Supreme Court says a criminal trial cannot be equated with a mock scene from a stunt film. Such trial is conducted to ascertain the guilt or innocent of the accused, arraigned, and in arriving at a conclusion about the truth, the courts are required to adopt a rational approach and judge the evidence by its intrinsic worth and the animus of the witnesses. The courts are not obliged to make an effort either to give latitude to the prosecution or loosely construe the law in favor of the accused. Now the Supreme Court says that the traditional dogmatic hyper-technical approach has to be replaced by a rational, realistic, and genuine approach for administering justice in a criminal trial. The name of the case law is Sachin Kumar Singhania versus State of MP, 2019, Volume 8 Supreme Court Cases, page 371. So this is a 2019 judgment, very recent judgment I have just read out. Now another decision on the same line, I just read out the main portion. You see, this is the 2018 judgment. Here also the Supreme Court has given the duty of the court for appreciating the evidence. What is the duty? Now first of all, I am mentioning the name of the case. Name of the case is Kameshwar Singh versus State of Bihar. Kameshwar Singh versus State of Bihar, 2018, Volume 6 Supreme Court Cases, 433. Here the apex court said that, please listen to me, hardly one comes across a witness whose evidence does not contain a grain of untruth, or at any rate embodiment or embellishment. It is the duty of the court to scrutinize evidence carefully and in terms of fallacious metaphor, separate the grain from the chaff. But it cannot obviously disbelieve the substratum of the prosecution. It cannot be obviously disbelieve the substratum of the prosecution case or the material parts of the evidence and reconstruct a story of its own out of the rest. So the evidence has to be appreciated as a whole, not only in a piecemeal condition, or just to pick up the some infirmity, some exaggeration, some contradiction with the 161 statements or the 164 statement. Court has to evaluate the entire evidence as a whole, and that must be in the light of the substratum. That is, the substratum means the basic tenor of the prosecution case. But it cannot obviously disbelieve the substratum of the prosecution case or material part evidence and reconstruct a story of its own out of the rest. Effort should be made to find out the truth. Now you see, we know that to search out the truth, it is the duty of the police, and it is the duty of the court traditionally to see that whether the case has been proved or not. As per Section 3 of the Evidence Act, it is the duty of the trial judge to whether the case has been proved by the prosecution beyond all reasonable doubt or not. But here the Supreme Court says the role of the court is much higher. Court will find out the truth. It is accepted that the investigation, there is some fault. Police will done the investigation in our country. They have various faults, and since the witnesses are coming to the court after long back, so there is some discrepancies that will be there. So we have to accept it. But taking advantage of those things, a real culprit should not be escaped. So that is why it is the duty of the court in that trial judge, in that case, to find out the truth. That is why you know that in 311 CRPC for recalling, 319 and even 165 of the Evidence Act, that court can ask any question. After the base bakery case, this situation has been changed. Now the court has to find out the truth. Now the Supreme Court says again, to such expert suspicion, court has to up all such things cloak the very truth. So long as the chief cloud and the dust remain, the criminals are clothed with. Again, I want to repeat this sentence. So long as the chief cloud and the dust remains, the criminals are clothed with such protective layer to receive the benefit of doubt. So in many cases, in our from our past experience, we have shown that the taking advantage of the loopholes of the investigation, or the discrepancies or the contradiction of the witnesses, the accused is getting the benefit. So here the duty of the court is to see everything in a very holistic view. So now Supreme Court says it is a solemn duty of the court not merely to conclude and leave the case the moment suspicions are created. It is the onerous duty of the court within permissible limit to find out the truth. Now, trial judge has to find out the truth. It should be punished, but on the other hand, to see no person committed an offense should go scot-free. Now, it is the onerous duty of the court within permissible limit to find out the truth. It means, on one hand, that no innocent man should be punished, but on the other hand, to see no person committing an offense should go scot-free. If, in spite of such effort, suspicion is not the very important parties, the Supreme Court says, if of such effort, now court has to take effort to find out the truth and to separate truth from the falsehood, what the Supreme Court says, and to take an holistic view of everything. Now, in spite of such effort, if the suspicion is not dissolved, it remains at large, and then the benefit of doubt has to be credited to the accused. So I'll just repeat. Now Supreme Court said that it is not the thing that once a doubt is created in your mind that this witness is it is suffering from some discrepancies, you should discard it in toto. It is a duty of the court to understand the version of the witness in the light of the facts and circumstances of the case. If it is consistent with the other circumstances, other circumstantial evidence, or the other thing, then court will ignore the small discrepancies and just to find out the actual version which is corroborated by the other evidences or the other circumstances. But if it But if it cannot be done, they can thereafter can discard it. That is why I'm just repeating that part again. It is the onerous duty of the court within its permissible limit to find out the truth. It means on one hand that no innocent man should be, that to see that no person committing the offense should get scot free. If in spite of such effort suspicion is not dissolved, it remains writ at large, benefit of doubt has to be credited to the accused. Evidence is to be considered from the point of view of the trustworthiness, and once same stand satisfied, it orders. So this is the observation, or this is the view of the no, actually the Supreme Court, I just in nutshell, the Supreme Court in this case says that it is not the only duty that once the court find that the evidence suffers from some or discrepancy, it will discard view. And to understand the, and if it is corroborated with the circumstances, then the court has to accept it. It is a solemn duty of the court not merely to conclude and leave the case the moment suspicions are created. So after reading the evidence, or after seeing the discrepancies, if the court finds this evidence may be doubtful, and court should not discard it only on the basis of that suspicion. Suppose he is an eyewitness. What court has to do? That court has to understand the evidence in the light of the other witnesses. If the main version of the evidence is corroborated with the other evidences or the other circumstances, then court should not be the ground to reject that particular evidence, or the accused should get the benefit of that. Court has to, because the duty of the it. So if suspicion is not dissolved, then the court can give the benefit of doubt. Evidence has to be considered from the point of view of the trustworthiness, and once the same stands satisfied, it ought to inspire confidence in the mind of the court to accept the evidence. So this is the thing. So this is the duty of the court nowadays. It's most onerous to find out the truth. He is not leaving the thing, the evidence only on the ground of minor discrepancies. The vital omission which actually affects the very root of the case, that has to be taken into consideration. So this is actually the position of the law in so far as the appreciation of the evidence by the trial judge. Are you hearing me, or?
Yes, yes.
Now let us come the power of the appellate court. Now is thin distinction between the two words. One is power, another is the functioning. Power is conferred by the Criminal Procedure Code, and the functioning means the mode of exercise of the power. Okay. Now, appreciation of evidence is the part of the mode of exercise of the power, that how the power is being exercised. Section 386 of the Criminal Procedure Code describes the power of the appellate court, what the appellate court can do. Now we know that there is a mainly two classifications of the appeal where the appreciation of evidence is required. One is the appeal against conviction, another is the appeal against acquittal. Now, appeal against acquittal is also can be done by the two agencies. One is the state, and now by the victim. Now, in both the cases, the appreciation of the evidence is required by the appellate court also to come to a definite conclusion. The power is there, but there is a difference in the power when it is an appeal against conviction and the appeal against acquittal. Where is such difference? I have to explain, because to understand its mode of exercise, we have to first to understand the distinction between the powers. When a person is being convicted, that means his presumption of innocence, which he enjoyed from the date of from the very inception of the case, that has been rebutted, and he prefers an appeal. Now, in an appeal against conviction, the appeal court has to reappreciate the entire evidence. That means court has to consider the entire evidence which has been recorded in the trial court, and after reappreciating or after going through the entire evidence, it is the duty of the appeal court is to find out that the finding of facts arrived by the trial court is correct or incorrect. If the appeal court, you see, after going through the entire evidence, take a view that no, the finding of facts arrived by the trial court is not correct, that means he is suffering from some disagreement, that he is not agreed with the conclusion arrived by the trial court. Then, in case of appeal against conviction, the appeal court can set aside the appeal and give the benefit of doubt to the accused person and give the acquittal. And also, if the appeal court finds, after appreciating the entire evidence, that yes, whatever the findings or whatever the conclusion arrived by the trial court is okay, then the court will affirm the conviction. So, in both the cases, in case of its own view to the trial court, the judge, then High Court can High Court affirm the conviction. So the appeal, since the appeal is the continuation of the trial, so the appeal court has the full right to appreciate, review the entire evidence in order to assess the finding of the facts arrived by the trial judge is correct or incorrect in the light of the facts and circumstances of the case. And in doing so, what High Court has to see, that is whether the trial judge has to appreciate the entire evidence, has to consider the entire evidence in the light of the facts and circumstances of the case, and on the basis of the well-established principles of the suppression. Consider all aspects of the evidence and come to a sound conclusion, and it is based on a sound reason. Now, let us come to appeal against acquittal. Okay. Now, appeal against acquittal, you see, once a person is acquitted, that means his presumption of innocence is reinforced or reaffirmed. So he is innocent. Now, when the appeal filed, then the court has to take in a little different view. The court, generally the Supreme Court says that the court should not interfere in a routine fashion in case of the appeal against acquittal, because the order of acquittal affirms the presumption of innocence. Now, the distinction in appeal against conviction and appeal against acquittal is that in case of the appeal against conviction, the court can substitute its own views. If the court is not agreed with the view taken by the trial judge, the appeal court can say, yes, this is my view and my view is right, so I will override your view, I will discard your view, and this is my view. But that thing is not there. That position of law is not there in case of the appeal against acquittal. In appeal against acquittal, if suppose after going through the entire evidence, if the appeal court has arrived in a different view, still he cannot interfere with the views taken by the trial judge, because the law is, if the two views are equally probable, if there is a two views, one view goes to acquittal, one view goes to conviction, then the benefit of doubt should get to the accused person. So this is the very thin distinction. I am just repeating because disconnected on everything, but this is a very important point. That is why I am repeating again. In appeal against conviction, the court can override the views of the trial judge and said that yes, my view is correct, you have to take it, and this is the actual view, and he set aside the judgment. But in appeal against acquittal, if the two views are equally probable, the trial court says that the case is acquitted, and high court view is no, it is not a case of, it should not be the case of acquittal, it should be case of conviction. Then if the two views are equally probable, then mere disagreement is not enough for interference in the acquittal or to upset the acquittal, to ascertain that the views are or is absolutely perverse. Okay, the view must be is perverse. And now, what is perversity?
Disagreement of what? এটা জিজ্ঞাসা করছে।
Disagreement regarding the views taken by the trial judge.
Right.
That is not enough in case of appeal against acquittal.
Means their query is only disagreement of view is not sufficient.
I am sitting in a high court as a judge. The court, after considering the interview, ground to upset, that is not sufficient. I have to, it has to be perverse. Yes, finding has to be perverse. Now, what is perversity? That is the, now I am coming. What is perversity? What is the point which makes a particular judgment perverse? When the trial judge, while appreciating the evidence, has ignored or omitted a vital portion of the evidence. A vital portion of the evidence, if it would have been considered, then the fate would be not the acquittal but the conviction. That means, I just repeat, why is appreciating the evidence, if vital portion is would have been considered acquittal but conviction. Perverse. When it is perverse, perversity means that court has overlooked a particular evidence, and if it would have been considered, then the result would be otherwise, not the acquittal but the conviction. So that point has to be ascribed or has to be said by the judge. So this is the thin distinction. I just here wants to read out one judgment, okay, where the Supreme Court has given a guideline. in appeal against acquittal, the appellate court can interfere. First, the name of the case is Chandrappa. 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 Chandrappa versus state is page 415. Now I just read it.
Chandrappa versus State.
2007 volume 4 SCC. 2007 volume 4 SCC page 415.
Okay, thank you, sir.
Yes. Now, this judgment is based on, there are actually numerous decisions on this issue. You see, the first judgment I remember that is of the Privy Council, Shiv Swarup's case. The Shiv Swarup's case is the first case that is promulgated by the Privy Council, where Supreme Court, where the Privy Council said that unless there is a compelling reason or the judgment of the trial court is absolutely absurd, the High Court cannot interfere. Now that Shiv Swarup's case judgment is subsequently adopted by our Indian courts, and in this case, the Supreme Court has given a 1, 2, 3, 4 a guideline. That is why I just want to read out that only the 5 guidelines. There are 5 guidelines. You see, first is, number 1 is, an appellate court has the full power to review, reappreciate, and reconsider the evidence upon which the order of acquittal is based. So there is no distinction between the appeal against acquittal or appeal against conviction insofar as the appreciation of evidence is concerned. What I said from the very beginning, only the difference is in power, but not the functioning. Appreciation of evidence is the functioning, that is the mode of exercise of the power. There is no distinction between the appeal against acquittal and appeal against conviction insofar as the appreciation of evidence is concerned. Both of the in both the cases, the appellate court has enjoyed the same power. Number 2, the Code of Criminal Procedure puts no limitation, restriction, or the condition on exercise of such power, and an appellate court, on the evidence before it, may reach its own conclusion both on question of fact and the law. Now, number 3, various expressions. Now, those expressions has been made in the Shiv Swarup's case. That is why the various expressions, such as substantial and compelling reasons. Now, so in Shiv Swarup's case, Privy Council says only on substantial and compelling reason, then only you can interfere. Otherwise, not. So the quoted Supreme Court says the various expressions such as substantial and compelling reasons, comma, good or sufficient ground, comma, within inverted comma, very strong circumstances, within inverted comma, distorted conclusion, within inverted comma, glorious mistakes. These are the phraseologies that has been used in the Shiv Swarup's case. Not intended to curtail the extensive power of an appellate court in an appeal against acquittal. Such phraseologies are more in the nature of flourishing language to emphasize the reluctance of an appellate court to interfere with the acquittal than to curtail the power of the court to review the evidence and to come its own conclusion. So, the sum and substance of the para is in case of appeal against acquittal, there is no restriction insofar as the law to interfere. It is the judicial discipline which imposes a self-imposed restriction on the appellate court that not to interfere, considering the presumption of innocence by the accused person which he enjoyed after getting the order of acquittal. Are you following me? It is a self-imposed restriction. Hello?
Yes, you are audible.
It is a self-imposed restriction from the various judicial discipline or the various judgments that is upon the appellate court. But there is no restriction by the statute. It is a restriction on the courts, that court should not interfere. Court has every power to review, reappreciate the evidence, come to its own conclusion. But unless there is a compelling reason or the sufficient grounds, that court should not disturb. Yes, thank you so much. Chief Saru's
Welcome.
case. Actually, I am sitting in my home, not in my library, so I am little handicapped not to fortify that.
No issues, Dada. You refer the judgments, I send them in the chat box. They'll be updated. No problem.
Okay. Thank you. Now, so this is a self-imposed restrictions on the appellate court that not to interfere when there is an acquittal passed by the trial court. Because you see, again I repeat that when there is a two views, one leads to acquittal, one leads to conviction, then ordinarily court should not interfere. Now the next point is, an appellate court, however, must bear in mind that in case of acquittal, there is double presumption in favor of the accused. Firstly, the presumption of innocence is available to him under the fundamental principles of the criminal jurisprudence, that every person shall be presumed to be innocent unless he proved guilty by a competent court of law. Secondly, the accused having secured his acquittal, the presumption of his innocence is further reinforced, reaffirmed, and strengthened by the trial court. And lastly, what I have already told you, that the point number 5, that if two reasonable conclusions are possible on the basis of the evidence on record, the appellate court should not disturb the finding of the acquittal recorded by the trial court. So if the views taken by the trial judge is a possible view, then possible view based on the evidence. Now, after considering the entire evidence, the trial court has come to a one conclusion, and the appeal court has come to a different conclusion. Then fourth point. The fourth point is, an appellate court, however, must bear in mind that in case of acquittal, there is a double presumption in favor of the accused. Firstly, the presumption of innocence is available to him under the fundamental principles of the criminal jurisprudence, that everyone shall be presumed to be innocent unless he is proved guilty by a competent court of law. Secondly, the accused having secured his acquittal, presumption of innocence is further reinforced, reaffirmed, and strengthened by the trial court. And number 5 is, if the two views are possible, then the court should not interfere in case of the acquittal. So the views must be a possible view after considering the entire evidence. Now, so I just, for the sake of repetition, I just repeating, because sometimes it is disconnected, that then when the court can interfere, the court can interfere only if the appeal court finds that a vital witness has overlooked by the trial court while coming to a conclusion that accused should get the benefit of doubt. Now here I cannot resist myself to share my own experience in dealing with a case. Now I dealt with a case where there is a political murder. You see, in our West Bengal, you know that most of the cases, either criminal cases, either arising out of the matrimonial dispute or political dispute between the two rival parties. So here there is a fight between the two groups, and 4% died over the issues of the election, Panchayat election. Now there are a number of accused persons are there. I remember almost 100 accused persons. This is a big case. Now it is the defense version that the persons who are died, they are died not by the hands of the accused person but by stampede. Now you see, in this case there are 49 witnesses, you see, and out of 49, 37 are the eyewitnesses, because in a political cases that all the members of the rival political party with a political motivation, they become the eyewitnesses to say that yes, they have committed, they have committed. All of them have said on the same tune, but they have said that the accused persons has actually committed the murder of these 4 persons by using sharp cutting weapon like tangi, sword, etc. Sharp cutting weapon. And we know that if it is the injuries on the sharp cutting weapon, then all the injuries are the incised wound would occur generally. But interestingly, witnesses said the medical evidence, the doctors, they said that all the injuries are not incised wound. Injuries are all. During cross-examination, the doctor, he admitted that these injuries can be caused by a stampede. Now the complainant, during his cross-examination, admitted that on that day there was a festival in their village and all of them was drunken, was on drunken condition, and there was a fighting between them towards the certain issues. They have admitted. Now the trial judge seems considering that there is a sharp discrepancy between the version of the eyewitnesses and the medical evidence, because all the witnesses consistently said that I have seen a particular witness. He has been inflicted injury by sword and his intestine come out. But in medical evidence, it found that intestine is intact. One of the witnesses said that he has using tangi, and he is hands cut off, but hand is there. So there is a very apparent distinction between the medical evidence and the ocular version. And the trial judge acquitted mainly on the ground that the distinction between the medical evidence and the ocular version is absolutely apparent, which actually and from which 2 possible views are coming out, one in favor of acquittal, one in favor of conviction. And trial judge disbelieved the version of the eyewitnesses on the basis of the discrepancy or the contradiction in the ocular version and the medical evidence, and could accept the views of these stampede theory, and court acquitted. Now there is appeal in High Court. High Court said when the case is appeal, the High Court's view was that High Court is not agreed with the view of the trial court. High Court said that no, there is a number of eyewitnesses, everyone has said so. Maybe there is a discrepancy between eyewitness version and the medical evidence, but always the law is that the evidence of the eyewitnesses will get priority over the medical evidence. But High Court become handicapped or become constrained because of the thing, because the trial court has taken a view. Maybe the view is not agreed by the High Court, considering the entire evidence. The trial court, while come to a conclusion that it is a case of stampede, and disbelieve the version of the eyewitnesses, considering the evidence of the doctor, the trial judge has considered the each and every witness separately and their version, and categorically said that yes, this witness has said that there is a shark cutting injury, but no shark cutting injury found. So everything, so trial court judge has considered the each and every witness separately, and come to a conclusion that these witnesses are not believable. They are deposing before the court with a political motivation. High Court is disagreed, but High Court cannot interfere to the order of acquittal only on the ground that in spite of they are not agreeing with the version of the trial judge or with the conclusion of the trial judge, but the appeal court does not find any perversity. Because after all, the trial judge has considered the entire evidence and come to his own conclusion, and that is based on a sound reasoning. So that should not be interfere in the appeal, even if the appeal court has court's view is that the view of the trial court considering of this entire evidence is not correct, and the law and the legal position is also not correct. That High Court's view is that it is not the advisable to discard all the eyewitnesses only on the ground of the medical evidence. There is a discrepancy, but still High Court cannot interfere. Now here I just want to show another judgment where the Supreme Court has described that what is possible view. Yes. Yes.
I have just sent them the 5 points from Chandrappas, which you
Oh,
have
great,
mentioned.
great.
It will be useful for them.
Yes, great. Thank you
Thank you.
so much.
Thank you.
Now I am giving another judgment that is a very interesting one. It is 2012 judgment where the Supreme Court has explained that what is possible view. Now Chandrappa Supreme Court says if the views taken by the trial judge is a possible and a reasonable one. Hello.
Yes.
The views is that reasonable and the possible view, then the court cannot interfere. Appeal court. And now in 2012, Supreme Court in another judgment says that what is possible view. What do you understand by possible view? I say the decision. The name of the case is Murugasan, M-U-R-U-G-E-S-A-N, M-U-R-U-G-E-S-A-N, Murugasan versus State, 2012, Volume 10, Supreme Court Cases, page 383. 2012, Volume 10, Supreme Court Cases, page 383. I am again repeating the name because name is South Indian, so Murugasan. Yes, Murugasan versus State. I am relying on the para 32 and 34.
Okay.
32 and 34 of the there is a SCC, so in SCC maybe tell. Here Supreme Court says the reversal of the acquittal could have been made by the High Court only if the conclusions recorded by the trial court did not reflect a possible view. The reversal of the acquittal could be made by the High Court only if the conclusions recorded by the trial court did not reflect a possible view. The use of the expression possible view. Oh, thank you. The use of the expression possible view is conscious, not without good reason. Now, what is possible view? That is explained. It must be conscious and not without good reasons. The said expression is in contradiction to the expression such as erroneous view or wrong view. So it may be wrong view, it may be erroneous view, but if it is possible, then court cannot. I again repeat the sentence. The said expression is contradiction with the expression such as erroneous view or wrong view, which at first blush may seem to convey similar meaning, though a fine and subtle difference would be clearly discernible. A possible, now the Supreme Court said what is possible view. A possible view denotes an opinion. A possible view denotes an opinion which can exist or be formed irrespective of the correctness or otherwise of such opinion. I again repeat, a possible view denotes an opinion which can exist or be formed irrespective of the correctness or otherwise of such an opinion. A view taken by a court lower in the hierarchical structure may be termed as erroneous or wrong by a superior court upon a mere disagreement. But such a conclusion of the higher court would not take the view rendered by the subordinate court outside the arena of the possible view. What I have explained you, I again repeat. This is a very important line. A view taken by the lower court in the hierarchical structure. Yes, thank you. A view taken by the lower court in the hierarchical structure may be termed as erroneous or wrong by a superior court upon a mere disagreement. But such a conclusion of the higher court would not take the view rendered by the subordinate court outside the arena of the possible view. The correctness or otherwise of any conclusion reached by a court has to be tested on the basis of what the superior judicial authority perceives to be the correct conclusion. Denotes a conclusion which are reasonably be arrived at regardless of the fact that where it is agreed upon and not by the higher court. The fundamental distinction between the two situations has to be kept in mind. As long as the view taken by the trial court can be reasonably formed, regardless of whether high court agrees with the same or not, the view taken by the trial court cannot be interdicted, and that of the high court supplant over and above the view of the trial judge. So this is the position. If the views are otherwise possible and reasonable one, considering the entire evidence, then High Court should not interfere in a case of appeal against acquittal. But that is not the situation if it is appeal against conviction. In appeal against conviction, the court can substitute, the appeal court can substitute in own views and override the views of the trial judge. Now, but here my point is, insofar as the appreciation of evidence is concerned, the power is the same. Only difference is in the mode of exercise of the power. The scope is limited. In both the cases, the power is the same. In both the cases, there is no embargo to appreciate the entire evidence by the trial court. But where he is exercising such power, so there is some self-imposed restriction on the appeal court in case of appeal against acquittal, considering the presumption of innocence of the accused person, which is reinforced after the trial court judgment. So these are the positions so far as the appeal against acquittal and the appeal against conviction is concerned. Now, till now I am talking about the cases when the case is based on direct evidence of the eyewitnesses. Now I just want to touch when the duty of the court while appreciating evidence when the case is based on circumstantial evidence, when there is no eyewitness. Now, in so far as the circumstantial evidence, we know there are the golden rules of the 5 golden rules, that each and every circumstance has to be established. The link between the chain of circumstances has to be formed, and which pointing out nothing but the guilt of the accused, excluding any other hypothesis. Now, in case of now that the appeal court, while appreciating the evidence to examine that whether the correctness of the conclusion of the trial judge, when the case is based on circumstantial evidence, that the High Court has the power to appreciate or to understand each and every circumstances very categorically. Now here, when the court is actually appreciating the evidence, trial judge, now he has to keep in mind a rule of caution. A rule of caution, because rule of caution is that there is some misleading circumstances which misled the judge to a different directions. I here want to read out a small paragraph of a English judgment. You see, where the English courts has given a rule of caution to the courts while appreciating the case is based on circumstantial evidence. These are very interesting. Are you hearing me?
Yes, Dada, audible.
Audible. So first I give the decision so that you can supply to this thing.
Yes.
This is actually, I think this is the, I don't have the citation right now, but the name is there. The name is the Hanumant versus State of Madhya Pradesh. That is 1952 judgment. The judgment of the Hanumant versus State of Madhya Pradesh. It is reported.
Yes, 23rd September 1952. Right.
Oh, great. Yes. Now, in that judgment, I think it is paragraph 11 or 12. The Supreme Court has quoted one decision, one para of the English court judgment. If you find out, please supply to the.
I've given the citation.
I think this REG versus Hodge, HODG. Now in this judgment, that particular part is quoted in, I think, paragraph REG versus Hodge, HODGE. REG versus Hodge 18 HODGE.
Okay.
HODGE. It is reported in I think 1838. Now in this judgment, this particular para has been quoted. Now I am just reading out. Now so while appreciating the yes. Oh, great. Right, you are absolutely right. This is while appreciating the case based on the circumstantial evidence. Now the court has to keep in mind about the misleading circumstances, which actually, thank you Somo, which actually misled the court to a wrong direction. Now here the Supreme English judgment say carefully. The mind was, yes, absolutely. Yes, in Jamalullah Bakhchi's one judgment, he's also quoted this, right? Recent judgment, right? The mind was apt to take a pleasure in adapting circumstances to one another, and even in straining them a little if need be, and to force them to form part of one connected whole. And the more ingenious the mind of the individual, more likely was it, considering such matters, to overreach and to mislead itself, to supply some little link that is wanting, to take for granted some facts consistent with its previous theories and necessary to render them complete. Now, here Supreme Court, now here the Privy Council in this case has said that, you see, when appreciating evidence in a case based on circumstantial evidence, there is a chain of circumstances. Now, chain is not being completed. There is a gap. Now, a imaginary mind or as an ingenious mind, they are trying to find out the gap or trying to fill up the gap by his own imagination. That should not be done. Yes, you are right. So that should not be done. The court has to be cautious about this, because a conviction of a person based on circumstantial evidence should not be based on any surmise or conjecture. So while appreciating the evidence based on circumstantial evidence, the court has to kept in mind on those issues. Now here I just would like to say another judgment. This is a very interesting. That is why and this is a very recent judgment. Name of the case is Gargi, Gargi, Gargi versus State of Haryana, 2019, Volume 9, SCC 738. Name of the case is Gargi versus State of Haryana. Now, in this case, there was a husband-wife, both are staying in a single room, and on the next day, the husband was murdered, and the wife is the suspect. Now, Supreme Court says only the last scene together with the husband is not enough to convict the wife. The court has to consider that whether the other circumstances has been proved or not. I just reading out. The prosecution has relied on the circumstances that the deceased husband of the appellant are lastly in the company of the appellant, and she has failed to explain his whereabouts as also the circumstances leading to his death. Held, insofar as the last scene theory is concerned, there is no doubt that the appellant, being now under the same roof, was the last person the deceased was seen with. However, such companionship of the deceased and the appellant by itself does not mean that a presumption of guilt of the appellant is to be drawn. Court below proceeded with the assumption that 106 of the Evidence Act directly operates against the appellant. Now, there is a misconception that once both the parties are last seen together, then the burden shifts on the accused 106. No, 106 of the Evidence Act does not absolve the prosecution's preliminary liability to prove its case beyond all doubt. this is a misconception are there that once there is a last seen together means there is 106 of the evidence set. No, here Supreme Court says yes. However, such companionship of the deceased and the appellant by itself does not mean that a presumption of guilt of the appellant is to be drawn. Court below proceeded with the assumption that 106 of the Evidence Act directly operates against the appellant. However, such an approach has also not been free from error. Consider that the 106 of the Evidence Act does not absolve the prosecution of its preliminary burden. In the given set of circumstances, last seen theory cannot operate against the appellant only because she was a wife of the husband, wife of the deceased, and was living with him. Now the thing is, the gap between the point of time when the appellant and the deceased were the last seen together and when the deceased was found dead had not been that small that possibly that the possibility of any other person being the author of the crime is rendered totally improbable. So only the last seen together and the companionship of the two person is not enough, and that is not absorb the possibility of preliminary liability. And here I refer this rule of caution of this of the English court, which recently also used by the division bench of the Honorable High Court, but just referred that the court should not swayed by the imagination just to fill up the list and to complete the chain of circumstances. Court has to see the other circumstances also, and only the 106 of the Evidence Act will not apply only on the ground that there is a last seen together. And here I also refer it the another very, that is Sarad Bitichar Sarda. That's a very important judgment on the circumstantial evidence. So I just request you to supply the citation. I'm just.
Is it on the 5 golden rules of circumstantial evidence?
Yes. Sarad Bitichar Sarda versus State of Maharashtra, 1884, Volume 4, Supreme Court Cases 116.
Okay,
that's a very interesting judgment. I repeat, Sarad Birdichar Sarda, SARD Sarad, BIRDHI, Chand, CHAND Sarda, SARDA Sarda versus State of Maharashtra, page 116. Yes. Yes, thank you. Now here in this judgment, shall I out of time?
No, you can continue with the judgment.
Okay.
And then we can shift on to the question answer. Okay.
Now in this judgment, you see, there is a strenuous relationship between the husband and the wife. Husband is a chemical engineer. Now one day night, when he returned home at night and went inside the room, and he found that the wife is sleeping, and he just laid down by her side. Now, because for a considerable period of time there is a strenuous relationship and husband and wife never talk to each other, so it is a very common thing. Now at midnight, the husband felt certain thing abnormal, and when he wake up, he found that his wife is dead, and now he became very scared, because you see that because only both of them are there, and everyone should be hello, not audible?
Yes, it's audible. Audible. Shreya, can you just log out and log in once?
Yes. Now he become frightened, because you see he become very scared, because the fear of the false implication, because only he and his wife is there inside the room, and he found that the wife is no more. So he just contact his father and some friends, and without informing the police and anybody, just uh, buried the dead body. So meanwhile, local doctor came. Yes, came and he said that he's died. She's no more. Now now without informing the police or to anybody, he just buried the body. But subsequently, everything was coming to the light. And he make a false defense statement. False. And his defense statement is subsequently appears to be false, and trial judge convicted him on the ground that he's last seen together, there is a strenuous relationship, and he has got some extramarital relationship with someone, and also he has actually hide the fact and make a false defense. On the basis of the circumstances, the trial court convicted him. In the appeal, High Court also convicted him. Now, when the matter has gone to the Supreme Court, while Supreme Court appreciating entire evidence, Supreme Court has found they have recovered a diary of the wife. You see, and she actually familiar with this French language, so she used to write diaries in French, so that to keep his keep her state of mind in secret, she used to write diaries in the French language. Now entire diary has been translated, and from the diary it appears that she is suffering from a depression for the long time due to the insensitive behavior of the husband. And out of depression and frustration, she committed suicide by taking poison, because her husband is a chemical engineer, so poison is there in their house, and she committed suicide. And on that day, there is a suicide note also there, that is inside the diary, but everything is written in the French language, and nobody has taken the task to translate it and to appreciate it again. Now the Supreme Court, for the first time, they take the initiative, and this is
found the diary, and
No,
it was found that she was under depression, right?
yeah, and from the diary it appears that she is suffering from a mental depression, and out of such mental depression she committed suicide. But that diary was written in trouble to translate it. The first time it has been translated in the view of the Supreme Court, and in this judgment you will find that the entire that has been actually dealt with by the husband got the acquittal. And here in the judgment, the Supreme Court says, even if the accused taken a defense and it appears to be false, the prosecution on his own leg, he died from the weakness of the defense. Prosecution has to prove its case independently without taking the help of the weakness of the defense. Now here the court, both the trial court and the High Court has given much emphasis on the false defense plea of the husband. Maybe his defense was false, or he has taken a false defense, but that is not absolves the duty of the prosecution. Prosecution has to stand his own legs. That is this is a very celebrated judgment. I request all of you, the students, mainly who are not read this judgment, to please go through it. It's a very interesting one, and if you want to understand the principles of the circumstantial evidence, you have to go through it. Now, here I just want to conclude with my last observation, that so far as the appeal court is concerned, the power of the appeal court is almost same like trial court to reappreciate and re-evaluate the entire evidence. But the appeal court has certain inherent limitations. That is, appeal court can visualize the situation. The appeal court cannot get the opportunity to see the witness. Appeal court cannot see the demeanor of the witness. So, what the trial court has seen, the trial court has the opportunity to see the witness, to see the demeanor of the witness, how the witness reacts on the questions, and trial court can note the behavior of the witness. That is why the appreciation of the evidence by the trial court has given much importance, and that is why the reason why in case of the appeal against acquittal, even if the High Court has taken a different view, but High Court generally cannot interfere, because the trial judge has the opportunity to see the evidence, or opportunity to appreciate the demeanor of the witness. Now, after seeing the evidence and after appreciating the entire evidence, when the trial court has given the acquittal, then merely on the issue that High Court is not agreed with the conclusion, High Court should generally not choose to interfere. There is a self-imposed restriction. So this is the sum and substance of this appreciation of the evidence by the appeal court. The power of the appeal court is only restricted to examine the correctness of the fact finding or the finding of facts by the trial court, and to examine the evidence for the purpose of scrutinizing the correctness of the finding of facts and the finding of the law, and come to its own conclusion. So this is actually what my understanding about the subject, and I have actually tried to show some important judgment, though there are many other judgments, there are lakhs of judgments on this issue, but these are the main judgments which I thought to be discussed. And thank you all for giving me the question hearing.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Jyotirmoy. There are a few questions which
Yes,
I'll
yes.
take. I'll thank Achin for very active participation, and Soumojit Das Mohapatra also.
Thank you, Achin, thank you, Soumojit. We
They
want
have
to see you.
And another aspect is that Achin has asked a question whether in the zeal of searching the mere truth, which is otherwise the job of executives, the judiciary is otherwise overstepping its constitutional limitation by ignoring the weakness of prosecution evidence and consequentially distancing itself from its conventional duty of rendering justice. Whether in the zeal of searching the mere truth, which is otherwise the job of executives, the judiciary is otherwise overstepping its constitutional limitation by ignoring the weakness of prosecution evidence and consequentially distancing itself from its conventional duty of rendering justice. Is it so?
No, that is not the thing, because you see, in the Criminal Procedure Code, there are certain provisions which empowers the lower judiciary to take its own view. That is Also in the Evidence Act, section 165 of the Evidence Act, the court can ask any question. So court is not a mere silent spectator. Court is not a mere silent spectator. Court has to take the initiative. If you see, suppose in a case where the public prosecutor is not that much active, he is reluctant, or due to certain issues, or whether the certain question has not been asked, which is supposed to ask to not to fill up the lacuna of the prosecution or to for the defense, but for the ends of justice, the court can ask. So 311 is there, 319 is there in the CRPC, where the court has the power. Court, our country, this is the practical thing is that police have the all time in a fair manner. So there is a lacuna in the prosecution that is there. By using the lacuna, culprit should not be scot-free. This is the actually underlying PVA, and we are not only accountable to the accused, but we are accountable to the
Okay.
So that is the thing.
Okay. There is another question from Debjyoti. Debjyoti, can you ask the question?
Yeah, good afternoon, sir.
Good
First of
afternoon.
all, I'd like to thank Professor Adhikari for taking this session so patiently.
Thank
Sir,
you.
I'm a student of Bengal Law College, Shantiniketan. I just
Yes.
wanted to
Sure.
get us enlightened on the issue of taking the issue by the appellate court in the convicted case and the acquittal case. In the beginning, you're audible, you were not properly audible. So could you please enlighten us in that
Yes,
matter?
yes.
And
It
one
is-
thing more I would like to tag, you mentioned the perverted decision. So is it a miscarriage of justice? The same thing is this?
Okay. Shall I? Our line ta kete jacche. Hello.
So,
His question is, he wants that particular distinction, small thin line distinction between by appreciation of evidence in case of acquittals and appreciation of evidence in conviction.
Okay.
That is his first question.
Yes.
And
Second.
number two is, does perverse findings amount to miscarriage of justice? That is what.
You see, there is no distinction in appeal against conviction or appeal against acquittal insofar as the appreciation of evidence is concerned. In both the situation, the appellate court has the every power to appreciate the evidence and come to its own conclusion, as I have referred certain judgments where it has been clear. But only, you see, I told here, but that there is a two things. One is the power, another is the function. Power and function are not the same thing. Power means, suppose you are the master of the house. You ordered your maid to cook a food, but you are not actually cooking the food, and the food is actually cooked by the maid. So power is the thing which is conferred by the statute, and the functioning is the mode of exercise of the power. The appreciation of the evidence is the mode of exercise of the power. So, as exercise of the power is concerned, there is no distinction. Only the distinction is in the power, and even the power also, there is no statutory embargo. It is a self-imposed restriction in case of appeal against acquittal, considering the presumption of innocence, which is reinforced by the trial judge. Are you following me?
Yes, Dada.
Yes, thank you very much.
And second thing, the perversity means when the non-consideration, when the particular evidence has not been considered, has omitted or overlooked or ignored. But if it would have been considered, then the result will not be the acquittal but the conviction. Then it is I just give you a small example. Hello?
Yeah, Dada, audible.
Small example. Suppose a case of 302. Postmortem report is there, but the postmortem doctor has not been examined. And the trial judge and the trial judge says, since the postmortem doctor has not been examined, so the postmortem report is not been proved, so I acquit the accused person on the ground. That is not possible, because if the doctor has not been examined, postmortem report is a document under section 294 CRPC. It itself the court can take cognizance. The evidence of the doctor is not required, and only on that hyper-technical issue the court cannot exonerate the accused. This is the perversity. Are you following me? I'm just
Yes, sir.
want an example. ঠিক আছে, আর কিছু আছে?
আর একটা ছোট্ট কোয়েশ্চেন, সৌম্যজিৎ দাস মহাপাত্র,
হ্যাঁ, sure.
হোয়াট ইজ দ্য ভ্যালু অফ সাজেশনস? আমরা যে সাজেশন দিই, আমরা ডিস্ট্রিক্ট কোর্টে যারা আছি,
হ্যাঁ,
ট্রায়ালের সময় সাজেশন দিই,
হ্যাঁ।
সেইটাকে অ্যাপিলেট কোর্ট কিভাবে ওয়ে করেন আর কি অ্যাজ এভিডেন্স?
In case suggestions তো it's a
মানে
just
সাজেশনসটা তো আর ম্যান্ডেটরি নয়। আমরা এই মুহূর্তে সাজেশনস when we
না,
place it,
yes.
onus of proof shifts on to us,
yes,
right?
yes, হ্যাঁ,
তো সেই জায়গায় অনলি দিস সাজেশনস ক্ষেত্রে যদি আমি ডিফেন্সে একটা প্যারালাল কোনো কিছু দাঁড় করাতে পারি,
হুম,
ইন দ্যাট কেসই আমার তো মনে হয় হচ্ছে তবেই সাজেশনসটাকে একটা ভ্যালু আছে।
definitely,
There is some DW দিয়ে সাবসিকুয়েন্টলি
হ্যাঁ, subsequently DW দিয়ে
প্রসিকিউশন এভিডেন্স এর মধ্যে এমন কিছু ফ্যাক্ট এসছে যেটা আমি সাজেশনসটা দিলে সেটাকে
হ্যাঁ,
কোরোবোরেট করে যাবে।
হ্যাঁ,
এই সময় সেই কোরোবোরেশনের পার্ট যদি কিছু থেকে থাকে তাহলে বোধহয় অ্যাপ্রিসিয়েট।
absolutely.
থ্যাংক ইউ দাদা।
Thank you.
আমি আজকে আমাদের ন্যাশনাল সেক্রেটারিয়েট মেম্বার প্লাস বার কাউন্সিলের আমাদের ইলেক্টেড মেম্বার মিহির ব্যানার্জি আছেন।
Oh, nice to meet all of you.
মিহির দা,
Only one thing that I want to learn, that under section 8386, power of the appellate court, it has already been heard by you. And my query is that in an appeal from an order of acquittal, reverse, such order or direct that further inquiry.
Yes.
Further inquiry, or that the accused be retried or committed for trial.
Yes.
Further inquiry, this part, one or two line, if you can say.
Actually, when there is a some gross miscarriage of justice by procedural error, suppose a particular witness has not been taken, or the evidence has been shut out, or some lapse in the procedural aspect, then, and which causes the prejudice to the accused. Suppose 313 has not been done properly, or 313 there is a important question has not been asked. Then in that case the court can
and an important document evidence has not been brought into the case as evidence. It is overlooked by the court.
It is overlooked, and in that case I just add that in that case that appeal court has the power under section 391 to take additional evidence if it is required for the ends of justice. Now the appeal court has the power to take additional evidence in a very exceptional circumstances, not to fill up the lacuna of the prosecution or the defense, but for the ends of justice.
For the ends of justice.
391 the power is there. And retrial can be done only
in exceptional cases.
In exceptional cases, that where there is a actually procedural lapses done by the trial court, most of the cases, and where that results the miscarriage of justice. Suppose I just give you one example. Suppose in a case charge is framed under section 302 in a matrimonial case, but court, without altering the charge, convicting him the husband on 304. That cannot be done, because you see 300, in case of 304, 113 B's presumption is there. So he has to 304B. So in that case the charge has to be altered. Without altering the charge, he cannot convict him.
And it can be done at any time.
Yes, that can be done any time, but without altering the charge, court cannot direct jump from 302 to 304B. So these are the procedural things which actually cause the miscarriage of justice, or which prejudice the defense of the thing. which prejudice the defense of the accused person. That
that is the prime consideration.
That is the prime consideration.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
And over to Arnab for the vote of thanks.
Thank you, respected guests. It has been a very engrossing session today, and thank you very much, Jyotirmoy. Jyotirmoy has been my teacher, our teacher in Hazra Law College. So today, after almost 10 years, I'm getting another opportunity to attend this class. It has been a very engrossing session, as it has been during our college days. Thank you, Jyotirmoy, and also to all the participants for being part of this webinar, as you had been for the last over 1 month. In spite of the network issue, it has been a fantastic experience. So thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Jyotirmoy da, Mr. Bari, Mihir da,